having just come out of the cloudy capitalist public holiday that is Heritage Day, seems as if it's fitting to focus and talk a little bit about this idea of heritage. It's a lingering atmospheric topic in South Africa because as a people who came out of the onslaught of apartheid, we still, in a very, very indicative way, are struggling to define our general heritage as South Africans collectively. I mean, we come from different lineages that span the test of times, having moved through conflicts and wars. We are a people known for our diversity and our struggle to find unity within it, no matter what the coat of arms say. What the hell does that have to do with South African hip-hop? I'm gonna tell you. Hip-hop is something that came through the veins of the diaspora. We roped it in as a form of inspiration, and here at the Headspace we keep asking the question, have we as Abantu baseMzansi truly been able to echo out hip-hop in ways that are authentic to our struggle? Or have we, in the year 2022, with hip-hop literally being a grown-ass middle-aged organism, are we in South Africa still appropriating the heritage of a people who themselves expressed hip-hop as a way of trying to find a level of identity? Let me attempt to answer this question using who I feel is one of the most prolific, proficient, and iconic rappers of our country. I'm talking about none other than uNtokozi Mduli, known famously and notoriously as K.O. This is an insert about his story, and I ask the question to you, maybe to myself, is K.O the GOAT? Let's get into it. First and foremost, if you've been following our episodes, you'll know that when we say GOAT, this is not a statement that hangs as an absolute identity. It's an evolving concept because greatness changes with the times. But as we're able to reflect at the things that have influenced us in the past and how they've impacted and kind of trickled into the present moment, subsequently determining our possible future, it's important to see greatness as a three-part process. You have the greatness you are given through tradition, there is the greatness you work with in the present moment, and then there is the greatness that determines where the future will flow. So if we're able to see the greatest elements of our past and how we're able to remix them in ways that create greatness as we live and breathe through people, art, culture, and traditions that we observe coming to life in front of us, we then have a sense of what's possible. So when we think of greatness, we shouldn't only think now and look at our immediate iconic figures. We should understand the historical references that make these people come into being in the first place. So a greatness that doesn't look at its past is incomplete. And a greatness that doesn't understand how the present trickles into the possibility of the future is also incomplete. So what I want to emphasize in this episode is how greatness plots itself out through history, present, and future. Using K.O. First and foremost, South Africa's golden age from 2005 to about 2009 ushered in a wave of artists who had to ask themselves the question, how would hip-hop become viable through communicating with the people and the demographic that South Africa had? And we had classic albums coming out of it, the Squatter Camps, Proverbs, Pro Kids, and one of these classic albums to come out of it had to be, or rather the classic acts and artist was a group by the name of Tear Gas. I know, if you were in that era and you were awake enough to realize what was going on, Chance was one of those songs which trickled into the collective imagination of what South African hip-hop came to be. Influenced by that boom bap, squeaky, chipmunk sample style, Chance was something familiar to our ears in an American sense, and yet it had these three brothers delivering narratives ngesikhathi that was undeniably filled with finesse, reflectiveness, and a sense of depth. And I know that that K.O verse is memorabilia for many millennials who witnessed South African and thus African hip-hop rise through narratives which were ours. A hip-hop which was beginning to be more self-aware of itself as African. K.O is important in that sense. From his first kick in the door, he's been a rapper who understood that coming from the cypher, understanding the culture as it manifests itself isn't enough. There is the question of who are you doing this for? Whether you're a graph artist, whether you're a break dancer, especially if you're an MC, where the voice and the message take center stage. Who are you rapping for? And from their inception, Tear Gas knew they were rapping for the people of South Africa, those who are still dispossessed psychologically, those who are still in a place where post-apartheid South Africa has this limbo effect of not yet addressing the fundamental issues which are at the core of what really happened to our past, as we still engage with putting this country together in a way that's sustainable enough. Tear Gas gave us songs that we could escape to, but at the very same time we could find ourselves in a place where we needed to ask the important questions. As a group, they were brave enough to borrow from America, like I said, giving us that boom bap inspiration, but also they had the courage to break out of the typical purist mold and give us a whole album that had hits like Umhlobo Wami, which, to be honest with you, was questionably Afropop and yet still centered around rap.
Yes.
They weren't afraid of coming out of the so-called hip-hop context in order to bring people into hip-hop in a way that was South African. I'm always getting accused for presenting some kind of homogeneous mystical ideal called authenticity, and I want to be clear about what authenticity is. Authenticity is being aware of how your immediate environment determines who you are, and being able to understand the configurations that make up who you are, so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're just driving and moving on pure influence and not assessing where that influence comes from. I think people who don't assess where their influences come from tend to make these grand mistakes that basically blot in front of our own eyes of simply appropriating without understanding how to translate all influence to you, so that by the time you express it, we might feel a tinge of where the reference might come from, but you've done the work of dissecting your own favorites. You've done the work of saying, I might be influenced by American culture, but if I just regurgitate it back to my people, it just becomes a capitalist reproduction of selling people a culture which might echo and inspire them in many ways because it represents a lot of what they want to be, but does not speak in terms that are immediate to their condition. And that's what we need to do in every arena of life. The impact, key on that word, impact. The impact is to speak in ways that are immediate to your surroundings, because your surroundings are going to be the vehicle that channels you outward. Rappers keep looking for a model of going from local to global, and quite often the mistake is to skip your local context to jump for the global. K.O always understood his local context. When he built his rap with Tear Gas, if you followed, there were a lot of people who questioned his lyrical ability, because other than delivering the witty one-liners, the double entendres, and the simple cadences, a lot of people accuse K.O of not having the emotional depth and complexity and technical prowess that it took to be a great MC. And how did he answer that? He went back to the drawing board. K.O as an MC has evolved with each track, with each single, and with each album, going from a phase where he was pretty much being influenced by the Lil Wayne Drake era, coming into the culmination of what became Cash Time, where K.O's greatest skill, which mirrors one of the rappers who basically has become kind of like a deified symbol of hip-hop success, is Jay-Z. Jay-Z is Jay-Z because he's been able to mature by learning from the youth. He's been able to pull this creative fountain of youth by understanding how to take the best elements of the times, remember the present, and translate it into his own age, remember the past, to determine something new, remember the future. So again, greatness is 3 parts. Has K.O managed to give us something referential, something present, and yet something futuristic? Let's go into it. Like I said, Cash Time, a group, comes through, and I think we can't talk Cash Time if we don't talk in the backdrop lunatic beats, because we're entering into an age where, artistically speaking, greatness is determined by your ability to move in a given context, in a tradition, whether you're a painter or a dancer, and to take that particular context and move it to the next level, to do things that haven't been done before. So let's talk about K.O. Has he done things which haven't been done before? That's essential, because if you have been following the headspace, you know that we keep championing the 5 principles. And again, we'll always be repeating them. Originality, emotional depth, technical awareness or prowess, mass appeal, and consistency. Yeah. These are things that when put together, in any context, in any field, determine somebody's level of greatness or excellence. And I feel that in hip-hop, particularly in rap music, it's more poignant than ever, because people have the tendency of confusing their favorites with the greats. We all have artists who we resonate with because their message and their style and their expression or their aesthetic is very close to who we are as a people. But really, when we're talking greats, we're talking people who, number one, found a way to outdo, or rather to surpass, their own influence. Who, number two, who have found a way to transcend their influences, firstly, and secondly, have found a way to make the music apply in all contexts of the human experience. That's emotional depth. And number three, who are aware of their own style and know how to make it fit in various sounds and sonic textures, and yet are very aware of the identity within their sound. So that's a technical prowess or technical awareness. Number four, who in doing that are able to identify how big of a market or an audience they can really attend to. And last but not leastly, through understanding that audience, they're able to move and grow and evolve with that audience as time evolves and trickle into the coming generations. Every GOAT, you name it, they've all fulfilled that. So when it comes to K.O, Cash Time Life was the reinvention of his own artistic integrity, because through young acts like Kid Acts and Smashes, he was able to understand a budding youthful culture and flow, and by proximity with Kid Acts, really find tweaks and cadences to take what he already had in his kind of squeaky clean, charismatic persona and introduce a level of playfulness and flow which matched his personality. Enter Skanda Republic. As an album, really redefined K.O, putting himself up as the president of a particular sound, as the leader of a particular school, saying that I've taken the best of what my country has to offer and I'm here to reinvent them in ways where they move, again, into the possibilities of the future. And Lunatic Beats was at the helm, helping K.O and the team sculpt a sound which had warm, do-esque textures combined with what was then the budding trap sound, and created something that South Africans and just hip-hop heads alike could resonate with. We were taken away, we were blown away by his bravado and yet cypher imbibed confidence of a son of a gun, with the finesse and the kind of kwaito driven charisma of a karakara, with his sidekick X right next there to him. Classic album. Many people will regard it as definitely beyond average, because what that album did is that, again, it took aspects of our past, redefined them in ways that made sense to our presence, and had us fucking excited about the future. K.O rapped about everything. He took Nandi Ngoma in and spoke about love in a way that you could relate to, whether you were sitting in the corner shipinini, or just driving in your car, or just reflecting about what it means to Ujola in these days and times. He had songs which basically were about confirming and affirming the self. He had songs which were really about maintaining dominance as an MC. But the one thing I feel we don't talk about enough is how Skanda Republic lacked one of the 5 principles: emotional depth. Most of the songs there were really charisma driven. It was K.O blooming and letting us know who he knew he already was, and just reminding us if we knew the same thing. Skanda Republic lacked a sense of reflectiveness about the country in its more darker hues. It was an album which was filled with a lot of reds and browns and dusty street images, and K.O kind of jumping out as this colorful poet, reminding us of the best of what we are and telling us that it's fine to dance through the motions. But it felt like K.O had no sense of weight and gravity about the very serious issues we were facing. Fees Must Fall was in the in the horizon, and literally youth and adult and elders alike in this country were dealing and engaging and wrestling with this idea of identity. And did Skanda Republic really address these deep-seated depths of where we were? No. There was no song which kind of slowed you down from Umjaivo and Ukanda and said to you, but where are we and where could we possibly go? And I think K.O understood this, because when he did the sequel, there were songs in there that really had us going into who we are as a people and what we needed to do to possibly find peace within ourselves and maybe be idealistic as a country. And though the sequel didn't do as well, I really felt what that was due to was the fact that by that time, Cash Time as a unit had dissolved for various reasons. We're not going to talk about the group in this particular insert. That's a whole other episode that just needs to happen, because we have a history of powerful super teams in hip-hop, crews that just make us want to root for the whole team, because they're a combination of different elements that come together in a way that is so dynamic. And yet what we've noticed, or what I've noticed, and I hope you've noticed it too, because if you haven't, then you're missing a huge part of these phenomena, is that when crews are led by artists who still feel they need time to be artists in their own right, it never works out. Whether we're talking about Maybach Music, whether we're talking about Motif Records, there is just a pattern in hip-hop where when the de facto leader still wants to actively pursue an artistic path that outshines and outlives all others, they will overshadow the team. And whatever the personal internal politics of Cash Time were, it is clear to see that K.O wasn't done. K.O felt the need to still continue. And can you truly lead others if you still feel that you as an individual still need to operate within the same stream? Can a rapper lead another rap team of rappers? I don't think that's possible. I think the best movements in hip-hop are movements that either have an artist that drops in ways where they allow themselves the opportunity to move back and have other members really take up time. Because if another artist is dropping, then that means you need to pause. And I think a pause long enough to make sure that the impact of a whole team resonates through can only be done if an artist is comfortable enough to allow those intervals of silence between giving themselves time to grow the movement. And I for one really think K.O was still really chasing that fire and felt like that impact, again, impact. Because if we're looking at Skanda, the word loosely translates to making an impact. The sound made an impact because it was unique. It was ours. And after Cash Time dissolved, so did the sound. Lunatic Beats, Mugs, and everybody who helped shape and mold this sound went their separate ways. And K.O was stuck in a limbo, creatively, moving into an era where he still had the flow, he still had the inclination to adapt into different sounds, but there's just never been a comfort zone for him after that point. After Skanda Republic, where he introduced us to this world, Cash Time dissolved that world, and I feel like K.O has been living in this no man's land, creatively speaking, where he's still looking for a sound that will really merge organically with the kind of rapping that he does. Because truthfully speaking, Skanda Republic 2 and 3 and every other project that he's dropped, then beat the EP with 2-piece, there's PTY Unlimited,
yeah.
These have been projects where K.O.'s heat from SR1 is lingering into sounds where it forces itself. And yeah, K.O.'s always had the elegance to out-rap most of his peers and also the younger people, but it's just felt that he hasn't been able to truly find flows and cadences that fit organically into this growing tapestry of trap's sonic hues. And in simple terms, what I'm saying is that when K.O set the sound scope, it determined and kind of put him in a context where how to evolve out of that could only be done in a way which reflected South Africanness. And after that, he's kind of been borrowing from sounds that really don't have that immediate resonance with this country and its energy. So it's kind of a contradiction to still call it Skanda Republic when the Republic of Iskanda is dead and gone. K.O is no longer the president of the Skanda Republic because the Skanda Republic no longer exists. All we have is the past, and that's why he's sonically struggled to really still remain at the top presently and moving on into the future. So let's conclude. We know that he's given us an album which practically had almost all the five principles, lacked emotional depth, which he lingered on and did to his sequel. But after that, there's still been this struggle to evolve as an artist, to take his artistic integrity and find ways of mapping it out in ways that make sense to how old he is, to who he's talking to where his life is at the moment. Because quite frankly, creatively, K.O has simply been borrowing and mimicking the lives of people younger than him and trying to relate to demographics that really don't speak to who he is as a person. So he might have still warranted some pop appeal by always being in proximity to the latest acts, but what has happened is he hasn't been speaking from a voice that's immediate to who he is and what he's going through as a man of his age, looking at his growing and maturing physical stature in hip-hop while still trying to remain relevant. I think it would be more interesting for K.O to pursue himself in ways which were truer to his identity than to try and adapt to where the pop scope is. Because I think in having enough faith in who he is, he would find a lane to still explore and grow through. So is K.O the GOAT? Has he given us originality, emotional depth, technical awareness, mass appeal, and consistency in ways that have really reminded us of the past, brought us to the present, and still give us a hope that his relevance and value as an artist moving onwards is something that we are still yet to discover? I think after Skanda Republic 1, he's been trying to navigate towards goathood, but because he still hasn't been able to make the Skanda expand itself in ways that truly show an artist who's evolving in their niche, what it's been is K.O playing second fiddle to whoever is popular in the era. So as much as he's been able to have the consistency and by virtue of that have close proximity to pop acts which still gives him the mass appeal, he has compromised a lot of technical awareness and emotional depth, and as a result originality. So he's kind of receded as the years go by through the elements. But let's look at what he's done. Skanda Republic as an album, has it made enough of an impact where what we hear today still holds weight and really shows us that K.O influenced a whole generation? Does the legacy that K.O has in his career with Tear Gas and as a solo artist compound to a legacy that has built enough formidable power for him to truly be regarded as a great artist? Culturally, I say yes. If you include the catalog with Tear Gas, K.O's career spans 17 years. But as an individual, he's pretty much still an artist who has a way to go, but is age on his side. So this is the conflicting element with K.O's greatness. Do we regard the work with Tear Gas as part of his legacy? Or do we start with Skanda Republic? Because if we're starting with Tear Gas, then I would say obviously he's the GOAT. Because from Shubelek Wovu to Wafa Wafa to Darko Blue, Tear Gas's impact was able to garner confidence amongst artists to play around with the different scopes of what South Africa has to offer and to rap in ways which weren't classically American influenced. So if you're taking all of that and you're combining it with what he's done, then it's undeniable. But it puts us in a limbo, because then what happens to Mai and Dogza? I for one feel Tear Gas is its own phenomenon. It's where K.O learned to grow as an artist. But if we're going to talk about his particular legacy as an individual, you tell me. Because I think we have to start at Skanda Republic. Because then that's where he's proving his own integrity. The argument goes to the same way when we're talking about artists like Black Thought or Andre 3000, or you know, who in their larger career spans were part of groups and have recently come at the helm in their own right. Yes, fans might have peeked into the artist in the group, but we still need to understand that when you're part of the family, you can't exclude yourself. Yeah. It is a family effort, and it's only when you branch out and the family gives you the opportunity to show us who you are as an individual. Because Tear Gas was 3 men's stories, and these stories were diverging in ways that inevitably led to everybody going solo. So as K.O went solo, Mai went solo, and Dugza went solo, this was an opportunity for them to redefine, reinvent, and yet, yes, restart their whole path. So I for one think that this introduces a question. Do artists that started as part of groups get to count their years with groups as part of their individual artistic growth? Because if you say yes, then again we've got to give it to K.O. Because combining the TGS albums would truly mean that he has given us the 5 principles for longer than most. But if we're going to start from Skanda Republic, which is what I feel he still feels, K.O is a rapper who's part of the millennial era, which is really approaching its end. Millennials are no longer the determiners of cool. They're now the CEOs, the managers, and the people at the background, kind of working at the bones of what culture can become in the future. But the faces of the generation, the ones who are navigating their own personal struggles, are these young people who are coming, and we are terming them Mama 2000. And as much as K.O is somebody whose impact has resonated to still carry a level of value, he's an OG. He's not regarded as part of the artists who are still at a point where they are now the ones speaking to the youth. He's an old guy in a new world, and I still feel like he wants to keep himself anew in this growingly refreshing world of new talent. And he's only had one solid effort to do that. An effort that I think could still be matched if he gave himself another opportunity to understand what made that project special. What made that project special is that it didn't pander to Americanisms. It did something which was undeniably South African. But after that, he felt the need to kind of open up his sonic scope to what was popular. And that happened to be a sound which was generically being taken from an American sound. This is what loses K.O.'s creative insight. And I think he's slowly coming into the culmination of his career, because again, the millennial era is reaching its edge. Skanda Republic 3 is not the project that is reminding us of a great man. It's a project reminding us of a man who's lost in the magic of an effort he did once and has been trying to relive that moment. He has not come back full circle, bringing us back to the importance of the Republic of Skanda. Because again, the Skanda Republic died with Cash Time. So maybe in order for K.O to give us something original, he needs to accept the demise of that, understand what the greatness of his past was as an individual, and how he can navigate his present to bring us into the possibilities of the future. He's a man stuck in the greatness of his past. Remember, past, present, future. K.O is stuck in the greatness of his past, allowing him to not make the sense of the greatness of the present moment, and as a result to not be able to navigate into the possible future. And I think if he truly understood the best parts of what made Skanda Republic, then he'd be able to understand that it's not about redoing that twice or the third time. Please don't give us an SR4.
Yeah, obviously.
Give us something that's truer to where you are right now. How old is K.O?
Jesus,
36, 38?
Yeah, he's in late 30s.
He's in his late 30s.
Yeah.
Show us how a rapper in their late 30s who's been part of a legendary group and released one solid classic album, can now give us either a swan song or an opportunity to mark his place as he matures as a rapper, because South Africa is still a country where grown man rap is growing. Remember, hip-hop is not for young people. That's just pop culture. So don't be afraid of growing old, but understand what growing old means in relation to your art. And I think for the longest time, the Skanda world is a desperate attempt for K.O to stay young. It's not a true reflection of where he is in life creatively. It might be what he aspires to still do. Hence, being around young people is the trick, but what that makes you is a creative vampire. Because you're trying to suck new lifeblood by being in proximity with the latest trends, and as a result, spotting talents that you relate with who are in the peer group you aspire to still attend to. And I don't think that's working. I don't think that's working for any artist, be it a Drake or be it a K.O. I think art speaks volumes when artists understand how to speak from their organic place and not be pressured by these capitalistic results to always try to acclimatize to youth or pop culture. Be you. And I think in being you, you evolve in a place that's more organic. Is Ntokozo Mduli the GOAT? Tear Gas is a GOAT group, but K.O is still yet to prove his greatness. And I think he's only got one opportunity, because as soul greatness determines, we look at our past to understand our present and possibly determine our future. And K.O has given us a lot of things to look back at. Salute. But we're still witnessing an artist who is very much engaging with his present moment in a state of conflict. And as a result, you can't be great if you are still in conflict with your own artistic integrity. I'm VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. I'm here to say, if you don't understand your past to understand your present, you can't truly make an impact into what the future has. So if the Skanda in the Republic is ever really gonna make its true impact, then I think K.O is going to have to truly assess himself from an honest place and say that the work he did with the group is the work he did with the group, and that K.O as an artist was defined by a township-esque wave that now is in question. And people like him are tasked with the answer of where does Kasi rap go. Because we wouldn't have a touchline if there weren't a K.O, I argue, and many other rappers. So as a result, K.O being one of the generals of a sound which captured this country's ear is one of the very few people who could determine where it goes. And as it so stands, it seems as if he's abandoned that sound. And I think by abandoning that sound, he abandons the very same thing that made him great.